Hi, this is Ben Fountain, author of Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk, just out from Canongate. I would like to say congratulations to Litopia on its 200th anniversary show, and we're looking forward to at least several thousand more.
We don't really push the envelope. More like open it. This is Litopia, After Dark. The net's first and foremost literary salon. A feast of ideas for your hungry mind. So pull up a chair and let's talk.
I've got so much left to say, but I'll take my words and walk away.
Very good evening to you. This is your fractionally unstable host, Peter Cox. Now, when you get to a certain age, so I'm told, anniversaries mean very little to you. Being 30, for example, used to fill me with dread when I was a mere 20-something. I still am, of course. Nonetheless, some birthdays demand acknowledgement, and so it is that I have to inform you that Litopia After Dark is 200 shows young today. That's right, 4 years ago, some nutter thought it would be a good idea to get some interesting people together and talk about sort of things you can't talk about on traditional broadcast media. Well, we've been breaking taboos and inflicting great damage on publishing shibboleths ever since. And while a few old farts in the publishing business may find us irreverent and offensive, frankly, that's their problem. So, happy birthday, Litopia After Dark, and here's to everyone who's made us the net's first and foremost literary salon.
Gathered from all 5 corners of the digital globe, from far, from near, from us to you. Tonight on Litopia After Dark.
Yeah, hello to my co-host, Dave Bartram from the West Country. Dave, what would be your dream anniversary celebration?
Celebrations, I have no idea. I think, given the last 10 days, what I'd do, the thing I would like most of all to celebrate something with would be a day where I don't work.
You just like a day off, would you?
Just a day off would do me right now.
Chances of getting that are increasingly slim, actually, I think.
Not kidding.
So ask Gally, same question. What would your ideal celebration be?
Champagne,
Of course,
boat,
of course.
sunset,
Yes.
and the family cooking dinner. That would be marvellous.
Sounds like a nice mum's day off, actually.
Absolutely. And chocolate chip cookies, of course.
It's time to discuss weighty matters, to weight up momentous issues, to thrash out the business that is book. We're erudite, we're witty, we're urbane. We are Litopia After Dark.
And if you're listening to the show as a recording, do remember you can get all Radio Litopia shows. Who did that? Come on, first up, who did that? Dave?
It wasn't me. It's not a girly thing.
I thought you were a Stepford wife there with a minute with your perfect celebration. It was something weirdly kind of, about it. Sorry, we have a lot of frogs down here in the West Country at the minute.
You're not drinking something, are you, David?
As if that would ever happen.
God. As I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted, you can get all Radio Litopia shows via iTunes. That includes the latest one, The Naked Book, which we co-produce in association with The Bookseller here in the UK. Most recent show I thought was an absolute blast, actually. If you're interested at all in getting your work onto television, that was the one you need to listen to. They're all available on iTunes. They'll download onto your computer, iPhone or iPad, and you can listen wherever and whenever you want to. We call it Litopia in your pocket. It's pure serendipity, and our star guest tonight is himself the victim of many anniversaries. Every article you see written about him stresses his extreme antiquity. So old is our guest that the great sage Malcolm Gladwell was compelled to write a 6,000-word piece about him for the New Yorker, ending with these words: sometimes genius is anything but rarefied. Sometimes it's just the thing that emerges after 20 years of working at your kitchen table. So, Ben Fountain, what's it like to have your first big literary hit at the age of 97?
Well, Oh, Peter, it's a real honor. Excuse me, I've got to go take some pills.
Thank you, Ben Fountain. But seriously, I mean, you're not 97. You look very, very sprightly. I mean, you're a young guy. Why do they all talk about you fairly mercilessly? Why do they all talk about your age?
Well, I mean, I'm 54 years old.
All right, let's get it out in the open. We'll be honest. Honesty is the best policy.
And I was a lawyer for a while. I quit practicing law at the age of 30 to try to figure out how to write. And so I didn't get a book contract for 17 years. And so, I mean, Malcolm Gladwell calls it late blooming. I call it slow learning. And
That's quite modest of you.
it is what it is, ultimately. I mean, it is kind of silly and embarrassing to be a debut novelist at the age of 54, but...
Hold on. I was going to ask you about that because I did find a very similar quote from you on the web when I was doing my research, which was very difficult to do today because you don't have a website, you don't tweet, you don't Facebook as far as I can see.
See how old I am?
Well, that's not true. You did say something like that in another interview that I can't track down at the moment. Why do you seriously think that?
Yeah. I mean, and, I'm just being honest. I mean, that's one of the bundle of emotions and reactions I feel. It is kind of silly, but by the same token, it is what it is.
Well, Gladwell's piece in the New Yorker, which I haven't completely read, I just read all the bits about you, because he sort of goes off as, Gladwell always does, into Puccini and God knows what else. But his main thrust, I thought, was a remarkably sort of facile, really. And all he's basically saying is if you want to get good at something, guess what? It might take some time to do that. I mean, that's fairly logical, isn't it? Why do we expect our geniuses and our literati to be fully fledged at the age of 17?
Well, he was questioning that assumption. And also, I mean, what was really nice about the article was he gave my wife her due. I mean, he very saliently and correctly pointed out that she put up with this project all those years and never once gave me grief about money, which I don't know how it is in England, but for an American wife to never bitch at you about money.
We have quite similar wives here.
We never bitch. We never bitch about money.
I've walked into a 70s sitcom now. I was in the Stepford Wives. Now I'm in some kind of 70s Twilight Zone. It's extraordinary. What's going
I'm
on?
prepared to come out and support women. I don't see why you should get grumpy and froggy about it.
What's going on? This guy's never heard of Mary Wesley, obviously. If you talk late bloomers.
Yeah, there's one.
How old is she? 70-something? First book?
Quite. Before we go any further, I think I've got to tell our listeners what your book is about. And, of course, what sort of critical reaction you've been receiving. So, I think the best way to do this is to read Nancy Pearl's review from NPR, which I think actually does both rather well. And this is what she writes. Ben Fountain's Billy Lynn's Long Half-Time Walk is a brilliantly conceived first novel that takes place over the course of one day. It's the story of a 19-year-old Billy Lynn, a member of Bravo's squad, a group of soldiers who, fresh from winning a firefight in Iraq that's made them media darlings, are brought back to the US for 2 weeks for a, quote, victory tour. That's intended to drum up support for the war. In parenthesis, dime, their cynical sergeant points out that they're being sent only to the swing states. They're spending Thanksgiving Day at the Dallas Cowboys football game, and at halftime, Bravo's squad is going to walk to the centre of the football field and meet Beyoncé and the rest of Destiny's Child. The irony, sorrow, anger, and examples of cognitive dissonance that suffuse this novel make it one of the most moving and remarkable novels I've ever read. And you have had glowing reviews like that all over the place, actually.
Yeah.
How do you feel?
It's nice when people seem to get the book. They read it with an open mind. And, they don't try to shoehorn it into their conception of the way a particular thing should be. So it's been nice. We're having a nice run. I know I'm being too polite and not very articulate.
You're not exactly coming over as a raging egotist, Ben.
Okay. Let me put it this way: when you get a good review, It's maybe 48% joy and 52% relief. It's almost as if, wow, I skated past that one.
It's your first novel. A few years ago, short story collection, Brief Encounters with Che Guevara, won the 2007 PEN Hemingway Award, 2006 Barnes & Noble Discover Award for fiction. We have to go back further than that to work out how you started writing.
I started writing because I finally decided I would never have any peace in myself if I didn't make a serious attempt to do this kind of work. I mean, I'd been practicing law for 5 years. And was doing well and was making a relatively, large amount of money. And my parents were proud. My in-laws were proud. I had a definite place in American society, so it wasn't a casual thing by any means to walk away from all that and decide I was going to try to do this thing that scared me a lot.
You were a real estate lawyer.
Real estate finance, right?
In Dallas.
Correct.
Where do you come from originally?
I'm from North Carolina originally, from the eastern part of the state, Tobacco Country, near the coast.
And your folks?
My dad, he has a PhD. He's spent his life in college administration. And my mother was she was trained as a classical pianist. And she gave up a chance to go to Columbia and get her master's to marry my dad. This was the early 50s, and so I'm sure there were many days when she looked at us 4 kids, these 4 screaming brats, and thought, what the hell was I thinking?
Very similar to what you just said a few moments ago about your wife, actually. There's an element of sacrifice there.
Yeah, there is. I mean, Sherry, my wife, will tell you that she was getting something from it too. She's a lawyer as well, and she was able to go 100% at her career. She knew I was at home taking care of the kids, running the house. And whereas if we had both been practicing law, we would have both been doing it, 80%, 70%. And
such is the life of a lawyer, isn't it, really? It's pretty remorseless.
It is.
Would you say it's creatively soul-destroying?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there are, pockets, moments where you can actually, there is room for creativity, but 85-90% of it is sheer drudgery. I was doing pretty complicated deals. I mean, deals for financing large real estate acquisitions, building big buildings, so these were pretty complicated things, and it was intellectually it was very dissatisfying.
And did you write as a kid?
No.
Not at all.
I mean, no, not unless I had to. And but when I did, it was okay. And I got to college and was a literature major, but I took 2 fiction writing courses while I was in college and satisfied myself that I had a knack, if not a talent. And, it was a powerful thing in me, but it scared me as well.
What was it that scared you?
A couple of things. Number one, you can be, the smartest person in the world. You can, be a high achiever academically, but that's no guarantee you can write. No guarantee you can do this kind of work, number one. Number two, it seemed to me that you would cast yourself into a kind of limbo psychologically and also in terms of society to try to do this kind of work. I mean, I didn't want to teach. I didn't want to be a professor. And so to just kind of be drifting out there and saying you're a writer or holding yourself out as someone who's trying to write, to me, it was kind of like being a crustacean without a shell. In American culture, especially because so much of your identity is tied to, what you do for a living and the institution that you're associated with. That's, you have this ready-made scaffolding for your identity. And it really intimidated me, the thought of casting myself loose from all that.
So when you go to a party, the first question people ask is, what do you do?
Oh, yeah, and for years and years, it was extremely painful. For a while, I would say, well, I'm a writer. Or I'd say, I'm trying to figure out how to write. Because to me, that was the most honest answer. but that signifies way more levels of angst, than most people want to get into over a cocktail. And so they'll like, oh, I have to, I'm going to go get another drink. I'll be right back. And so then I started saying,
It's like
okay.
you've got some sort of social disease. isn't it,
Yeah,
really?
and so I'd say, well, I write books. And they'd say, oh, wow, tell me about your books. And, well, actually, I haven't published any books. And so after a while, you just become this kind of sort of silent, smiling, person.
Well, you've just summarised the social experience of 99% of writers, actually.
Yeah. But, after a while, you learn how to deal with it. And, we all have to live in the world.
How did you deal with it? Did you lie?
No, I never lied. I just said, well, I'm trying to figure out how to write. And, I'm getting short stories published here and there. Maybe someday I will get to the point where I do something that really pleases me.
You seem very relaxed about it, but I'm trying to find the inner flame, that passion that made you jack in a very safe, sensible job to do something that was anything but. What is that thing inside you?
I think you don't have a choice at a certain point if you're going to do this kind of work, and be extremely serious about it. Not taking yourself seriously, but the work itself seriously. You have to go all in. You can't half-ass it. You can't practice law during the day or practice medicine or do your advertising job and then go home at night and expect to write anything that's worth a damn.
Did you worry that you got enough experience of the world in order to write?
No, by that point, I had been around enough Dallas millionaires and bankers, and seen enough crooks and seen enough, really fine people, to feel like, okay, I have some idea of how things work, and that wasn't a concern. I knew I would have plenty of things to write about.
According to the Tampa Bay Times, the Iraq War hasn't yet had its Catch-22 or Slaughterhouse-5, but Billy Lynn's long halftime walk is a contender. A wicked sense of humour, wonderful writing, and beneath the anger and outrage, a generous heart. Do you get fed up at all of being compared to Joseph Heller and Kurt Vonnegut?
No,
Well, it's a nice thing.
yeah, it's an extraordinary book. I don't think Billy Lynn's long halftime walk is very much like Catch-22 at all. And I have to say, I wasn't thinking about Catch-22 very much, if at all.
There is a reference to, at least one reference in it, isn't there?
Yeah,
To
there is
the-
this
the-
circular thing about the movie business, and that's obvious. And of course, it was on my mind then, but I was thinking a lot more of Robert Altman while I was writing this book. I was thinking more in terms of, not because I wanted it to be a movie or set out to write a book that would be made into a movie, but just, this wonderful way that Altman would, have these overlapping agendas and people talking over one another and people being together, but not really, everybody's got their own program, their own agenda. And, I'm thinking of Nashville in particular. So I thought about Altman a lot while I was writing this book.
There is a debate online as to, you wouldn't see this at all because I don't think you ever turn a computer on except to write, do you? But, but there is a debate online as to whether it's satire or not. Have you got a view on that?
Yeah, I think it's straight up realism. I didn't set out to satirize anything or exaggerate anything. To me, there's nothing in that book that hasn't already happened. And, if you stick these guys, just by virtue of the situation, I teed it up for myself. It's the middle of a Dallas Cowboys football game, which by definition is a bloated, corporate, manufactured event. And where, all sorts of, exaggeration is just the air you breathe in that world.
How did the idea come to you originally?
Right after the 2004 elections, I went into a state of profound depression and realized I didn't have a clue as to what the United States was, or I just didn't understand my country. I couldn't understand how people could vote to give that particular group of people, Bush and his folks, another 4 years.
What made you think like that?
Because to me, it was just so obvious that they were trying to hijack all the apparatus of structure in the United States, politically, financially, militarily, and also in terms of the media.
True of most politicians most of the time, isn't it? There's always a self-serving element there.
There's, certainly in American society, there has always been a number of elements who are trying to hijack power in the country. But this time they were succeeding. And it was really frightening to see. They were getting away with it. And then they get affirmed for 4 more years. So, and then about 3 weeks...
I've got to say, I mean, you come from Bush territory, of course.
He lives about a mile from me now.
That's nice.
And the bastard hasn't invited me over.
Well, he's not going to now, is he, if you read your book?
I guess not.
Is it fair to say that in the middle of Texas, your views were substantially in the minority?
Yeah. But, in a way, that's all right. I mean, I'm always being challenged. I can never rest easy on my assumptions. The other side is always being thrown in my face. So hopefully it helps keep me honest.
So 2004...
Oh, yeah.
Re-election or election, whichever you prefer.
Okay, well, that Thanksgiving, we had a bunch of people over at the house, and the Dallas Cowboys game was on in the background. And the halftime show came on, and I'd had a couple of martinis. And so I just sat there on the sofa and actually started watching the halftime show. And it was this amazing mashup of pop culture, softcore porn, militarism. I mean, there must have been 200 soldiers out on the field. There was a United States Army drill team out on the field, these guys who do the close order drill with the rifles, 5 or 6 marching bands, flag girls, baton twirlers. It was like...
You're talking about everything that's best about America.
Well, everything about America, yeah. And so I'm watching this and I'm thinking this may be the most insane thing I've ever seen. But in the middle of this huge... phantasmagoria that's happening out on the field, the camera just for a moment cuts to a small group of American soldiers, 5 or 6 or 7, and they're lean and tan. And immediately you thought, they've just come back from there. They've been in Iraq. And the second thing you notice is they're stumbling around and they're laughing. And so you think they're drunk. And then you think, well, of course they're drunk. I mean, how else would you stay sane, after having been in that ultimate reality of combat, and then to be brought back and dropped into the middle of this very surreal, artificial situation? What would that do to your head? And then I thought, well, I think there's a story there. And so that was the genesis of this book.
That was the moment. So you've got some very good reviews, apart from the great and the good and the literati. You've got some very good reviews just from ordinary readers, if anybody looks at Amazon.com or Amazon.co.uk. Here's one that caught my eye. I assumed, says the reviewer, it was written by a veteran, i.e. an army veteran. It isn't. And that's really amazing, because this is a pitch-perfect look into a soldier's experiences. I say that as a veteran of Desert Storm. And other people have said the same sort of thing. That's very complimentary. What sort of research did you do?
I saturated myself with it. I read all the books I could read. I saw all the documentaries. I collected all the magazine articles. I talked to all the vets who were willing to talk to me, well, vets and active soldiers. So basically, I tried to immerse myself in that world. I felt like I had to earn the right to write a book like this. Since I've never been a soldier, never been in the military, so I had to do my very best to do that part of it correctly.
And you have done.
Well, I mean, it's really gratifying when soldiers tell me, you got it right.
We've now got to a stage where the majority of fatalities from that particular war in Afghanistan are suicides, not people blown up by IEDs and all the rest of it. Can you understand that?
Yeah, absolutely. American culture gives little or nothing to its young people that's going to sustain them through the crises of their lives. And I mean, if you live long enough, you're going to take some serious hits in life. I mean, you're going to have problems in marriage, or problems with your kids, or problems with your parents, or in your jobs, or, I mean, you are going to face real challenges in your life. And I mean, most of American education consists of, the movies and the mall, video games, what's on the computer, and public education is really in a pretty abysmal state. And so what does this culture give its young people that's going to get them through the genuine crises? I mean, really nothing. I mean, very little, unless they happen to get lucky. And so it doesn't surprise me at all that that these young people see no way out.
In other words, we as a society don't really care.
In effect, right. I mean, people say society says it cares. When people say they care, I think they really mean it, up to a point. But these are the same people who are saying, "Don't raise my taxes." Actually, I don't want to pay any taxes. God forbid you should, God forbid I should be taking home $850,000 instead of $900,000. So there's a hypocrisy verging on schizophrenia that's running through American culture, I think.
There's also a sort of disconnect now, isn't there, that didn't seem to exist in the last great conflict, Vietnam, because the army now, it does not consist of draftees. Consists of people who probably couldn't get another job, really. So one of those gets killed in combat, or kills himself when they come back, or just gets injured. It's not somebody you know, is it? It's not someone the great middle classes. It's not your son. It's not your daughter. It's somebody else's. Right.
It is. There's been a great disconnect in this war. I mean, with Vietnam, LBJ, he undertook to fight a major war, and yet he wanted to soft sell it to the American public. We aren't really fighting a major war over here, so just go on about your lives. With Bush, it was presented as a major war. This is, the conflict of our time, good versus evil, and we are engaged in a conflict of epic proportions, but keep spending money, go out to the shopping mall.
It's the patriotic thing to do.
Yeah, and we don't want you to be disturbed in your everyday life. And so it was the flip side of Vietnam, in a way. And, of course, no draft. And so, the draft was what really drove it home to the middle class in America with Vietnam.
Would you like to see the draft come back?
I would like to see us not be involved in wars, wars of choice.
That used to be the Republican Party's mantra, didn't it? Some decades ago.
Yeah.
All the trouble that Winston Churchill had trying to persuade the Americans to get involved in World War II. Yeah. I mean, they'd be over here quick as a shot.
Right.
No.
Since you mentioned the thing about reviewing numbers, Colin M has pointed out that actually Billy Lynn's got 36 reviews on Amazon and 124 on Goodreads. So clearly it's popular with the masses. I'm just wondering, you're talking about being challenged, or about your views, and challenged in Dallas, as it were. Does it help being a lawyer? Because I hate to say this, but I always think of lawyers as being argumentative, naturally competent. Is that true, or is that a horrible generalization?
Well, I think the longer you practice law, the more combative and argumentative you become. I can draw on that when I need to. I can marshal my arguments. But in general, no. I know less and less of the law the older I get.
This may be I'm drawing something out of what you're saying. It seems to be very black and white. I mean, I was thinking about your statement very, very early on about how if you're doing a day job, basically you can't write something that's worth a damn because your energy is spent elsewhere. And I immediately thought of Stephen King, and thought the situation he was in when he got the advance for carry, for example. And I thought, that's a pretty black and white statement. I mean, I kind of hope you're wrong, otherwise I'm fucked. And I just thought, that's a very black and white statement. And I wonder whether that comes from the law thing where you have the right thing and then you have the wrong thing. Or, life, it seems to me, and it's more untidy, everyday kind of feel, is very much, a vast collage of shades of grey, really. The extreme blacks and the extreme whites seldom appear in people's lives, thank goodness. And it tends to be much more kind of finding, those shades, as it were. Not shades of grey in that kind of Mrs. Dodgy book that's been written by a lady.
No. Don't mention that.
No, don't mention the war.
No, Dave, you're right. It was an extreme statement. And actually the law the law is very rarely all black or all white. If it was, then you would have very few disputes. But, over the years, there are exceptions. There are exceptional people who can have a day job and they manage to write good work in their off hours. I wasn't one of those people. I figured I had to devote the best hours of the day and most of the hours of the day if I was going to get anywhere. And actually, I think that's true of the vast majority of people out there. Writing fiction is hard work. It takes a tremendous amount of concentration and energy. And if you have a real job, a day job, chances are if you're disciplined enough to be writing on your own, then you're going to be disciplined enough and conscientious enough that you want to do a good job at your day job. And so when it comes down to one or the other, you're going to work on the day job. Wallace Shawn said a job is a very dangerous thing for a writer to have. When I told that to my poor dad, he just shook his head and turned away. He knew it was hopeless. But again, it was an extreme statement. Obviously, there are exceptions.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to ask, we were talking about the book, and you were talking about the kind of the suicides and all those kinds of things. I watched a documentary, a First World War documentary recently, and it was made in the 70s, so there was lots of kind of first-hand testimony from survivors of battles like the Somme and Ypres and things like that. And, I wondered what the difference was. And part of it was obviously the very tangible foe. There was kind of, it was us or them, and it was in our backyard, as it were. Whereas you think about these other conflicts, they're very remote, aren't they? And we see them through the television, and it's all quite distanced and almost fiction-like in the way it's presented to you. It's been narrativized.
Right. Well, I've been asked before, what's the difference between these veterans and World War II veterans? Right. The veterans came home from World War II, and there wasn't this culture or mythology that surrounded them of damage, of trauma. They came home and got on with their lives is the mainstream narrative. But if you scratch away at that just a little bit and dig into family stories and anecdotal histories, time and again you come across stories of the uncle or the cousin who, whenever the subject of the war would come up, he would just get up and leave the room. Or years later, after he's died, the wife says he had nightmares the rest of his life, or he wouldn't talk about it. And so that's why I started reading books about World War II, because I wanted to understand why my husband was so changed when he came home. Maybe a palliative to all that was the fact that it was such a tremendously collective effort. There was widespread understanding and sacrifice across the culture. Whereas, in these most recent wars, it hasn't been that collective effort. And then, there are qualitative differences. I think it, as you pointed out, it matters a lot that there's a well-defined enemy, or more or less well-defined enemy with well-defined territory on both sides, as opposed to, the woman in the burqa, walking towards your Humvee, you might have to shoot her because she may have a bomb vest on. And that's happened over and over again. Young men killing women in Iraq, and sometimes they were armed, often they weren't. And then also the sheer volume of ordnance that's unleashed in these most recent wars. I think, starting with Vietnam, I think, I read some statistic where in the course of 6 months, more bombs were dropped on Vietnam than the U.S. dropped in all of World War II. And, you can take it from there. It's across the board. So I think there are a lot of differences.
I think the other difference, I think we said this before again, is when you think of the First World War, I was just happened to watch a documentary about that, and also the Second World War, gains and victories were counted in terms of territory, and now they're in terms of body count. We killed 30 of them today, or 50 of them, or 200 of them, whereas before it would be we gained half a mile or 100 yards or lost whatever.
Right.
And that's a very different kind of mental place, isn't it? One is we are, these people are sacrificing themselves to gain something tangible. Here it is that they're just trying to kill the other guy before they kill them, and that seems to be the sole aim. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the Pentagon consciously tried to stay away from the body count metric, as they call it, in Iraq and Afghanistan this time around. But then, you're right. How do you measure progress? Well, they would start measuring progress by, sewers built, schools built, water treatment plants built. But it became a much more nebulous sense of accomplishment or lack thereof, which I think, contributes to the psychological limbo that it puts the soldiers in. At the end of the day, what have they done? It's like they've tried to shove water out of the boat with their hands, and the water just keeps coming in the bottom. That's got to do something to your head. This is a political book that I've written. And I don't try to hide that. And first of all, in a war, there is the what of war, what happens. But you only have to go a half a step further to get into questions of why. It's only natural, it's only human, it's part of the experience. Why are we doing this? Why are we here? Why are we killing these people? Why are they killing us? And if a coherent, genuine answer can't be supplied to that question, then I've got to believe that does tremendous that causes a tremendous amount of psychological confusion, bewilderment, not just psychological, but in every way.
Let me just pick you up on that aspect of being a political book. I was just going to tell you it was a political book. We've already admitted that. Obama, very keen on drones. We had this enormous push soon after he got the Nobel Peace Prize. The irony is inescapable, isn't it?
Yeah. I haven't really applied my mind to the whole drone thing.
Well, apparently he has baseball cards made up.
Right.
And, before anyone is officially targeted, and of course there's a lot of what they call collateral damage, the wedding guests and so on. But there are these rather disturbing baseball cards, and he's shown these things. And New York Times wrote about one 2 or 3 weeks ago. It's a 17-year-old girl. They said, "Sir, we want to take her out." And he said, "Well, it's only 17, yeah. Okay, go ahead, do it." This is profoundly disturbing.
It is profoundly disturbing, and you're relying on, the intelligence services, who, they haven't given any indication of having rehabilitated themselves from the gross errors of the last 30 years. And so I think, a right-thinking person would approach their recommendations with a great deal of skepticism.
Do you support Obama?
Yeah.
Even though?
Even though.
Okay. Room for discussion there. I just want to ask you something else, though. Have you read, and if you haven't, I thoroughly recommend it to you, Very, very short. It's not even a book. It's more of a pamphlet by someone called Smedley Butler.
Smedley Butler was a U.S. Marine,
Exactly.
and
yes.
he did service in Haiti.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he wrote an amazing book many years ago now called War is a Racket.
Well, he was a man far ahead of his time.
He certainly was. And he said, basically, all I've been doing is working for large corporations, and I haven't been advancing the national interest. It's quite interesting what he said. He said, really, we've only got a legitimate need for any armed forces to defend our borders. And anything beyond that, we shouldn't be there.
I think for the most part, he's right. War is big business, and it's great business. And, I mean, if you want to draw a distinction between Catch-22 and Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk, I would say, well, think about this. One of the things Heller was doing in Catch-22 was pointing out the absurdity of the bureaucracy of war. And what I was more interested in or stumbled into in the course of writing Billy Lynn was the corporatization and marketing of the war. I mean, basically, the soldiers are used as advertisements to sell the war because everybody supports the troops. Of course they do. These are young men and women, you know, putting themselves, you know, in mortal danger. But politicians can get away with a lot of shit.
Pageantry, jingoism, self-congratulation, all these tools, as you just say, are marketing tools being used for some people's or some companies' very specific purposes. I'm wondering what next? I mean, what power do we have, do you think?
I think it's getting more and more difficult. I think for popular power to assert itself in American society. And I think for many years, the reason why you saw such huge damage awards being given by juries to aggrieved individuals at the expense of large corporations was there was this inchoate sense in American society of something is really fundamentally, profoundly wrong. Individuals have very little power, but if you're serving on a jury in a personal injury case, this is your one chance to strike a big blow against the big guy for the little guy. I mean, corporate money has co-opted the legislative branch, pretty much co-opted the executive branch. The judicial arena was the one area where the little guy still had a chance, where the rule of law was still more or less in play. But with what they call tort reform and judicial reform, and also the increasingly conservative bent of the judiciary, even that's being taken away. If you look at the last two appointees to the Supreme Court, Roberts and Alito, those guys are company men down the line. I mean, every single opportunity, you know, they had up until this past week, those guys always sided with the big guy. They always sided with corporate power, the establishment power. And and now with the Citizens United decision, corporate money and corporate power becomes even more supreme. And, you know, so I think American society is in a real crisis. I mean, and I know people say that every year, every day, you know, for the past 200 years, but I think the proof is tangible.
How do you see it resolving? Because people are very unhappy. The middle classes are more stressed and pressured than ever before,
Right.
financially and in many other ways.
Well,
too.
I think where it's going to go is, I mean, the communists are not going to destroy capitalism. The socialists aren't. The environmentalists aren't. You know, the progressives aren't. It's the capitalists themselves who will destroy capitalism. They will push it too far. In the last 30 years, they keep coming closer and closer with the savings and loan crisis in the late 1980s, long-term capital management crisis in the late 1990s, and then in the crisis of 2008. We get closer and closer to the edge when that meltdown comes and, you know, you have 40% unemployment and a van pulls up outside your house one day and drops off grandma in her wheelchair from the nursing home because, you know, Medicare is no longer functioning. I mean, when it's really driven home to people in their daily lives that they are screwed, then I think you will see, you know, a sea change in the American consciousness.
You were going to say fucked.
Yeah.
And so we can say that. It's the internet.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think so? Do you think so? Or do you think, I mean, I'm not just talking about America, I'm talking about, because we're all in Western civilization here, so-called civilization. Do you think people, do you think there's been a change in our sort of, in our mind? I mean, just looking back 200 years ago, you know, America was founded on revolution. It was founded on the idea that, you know, we're not going to take this anymore. And now people are, they like sheep, really.
Right. Well, you know, American society has remade itself twice. In the American Civil War, and Abraham Lincoln, who I think was the greatest American president, and that's a Southerner saying that. And then Franklin Roosevelt with, you know, coming out of the Great Depression and the New Deal and all of those social programs. In both of those instances, I think were existential crises for the United States. And there was real civil violence, popular violence in the United States in the early 1930s, which is suppressed. You never find it in the history books. There were armed insurrections in the Midwest. If Roosevelt hadn't taken the steps he did, I think there would have been, you know, substantial conflict in the United States.
I want to talk about another issue that you raise, which is a very neat expression here, state-sanctioned ignorance. State-sanctioned ignorance. What do you mean by that term?
Did I say that?
Yes, you did. Oh, come on, Ben. You're not that old. Surely you remember.
State-sanctioned ignorance. Well, I have some ideas of what I might have meant.
If there was real knowledge to be had in the Texas public schools, he never found it. And only lately has he started to feel the loss, the huge criminal act of his state-sanctioned ignorance as he struggles to understand the wider world.
Well, you know, this goes back to what we were talking about with the suicides among the soldiers. I mean, what in the way of sustenance does American education give its young people these days? I mean, kids spend 7 or 8 or 9 hours in school every day, and I'm not sure what they're doing. I mean, if you look at the textbooks, they're pretty abysmal, and Texas is famous for its watered-down, right-wing, politically correct textbooks. I mean, where you'll find very little mention of labor movements or civil rights movements or the New Deal. I mean, it's very Orwellian. I mean, you know, where the history is suppressed and subtracted from, you know, mainstream culture. So that's what I was talking about, was state-sanctioned ignorance.
Yeah, I was actually in school in America, and I don't recall any foreign history at all. As far as I can remember, all I ever learnt was American history. And in fact, American geography. I knew all the states' capitals and all the rest of it, but I don't recall learning any other geography. So, you know, it's almost like there is a real focus on focusing, on blinkering.
I never knew that, Ali, because you were talking last week about your RASTA tendencies. Is there some reflection of that?
I lived in Jamaica as a child and then in America. In Atlanta, Georgia. I never spoke like an Atlantan, but I did speak like an Rasta.
Atlantean, very good.
So from Jamaica to Georgia. Well, at least the weather was similar.
It was actually bizarre. Can I just ask before we lose Ben, actually, what are you writing at the moment?
I'm messing around with some short stories and you know, kind of gathering my thoughts for the next novel, and which I think is going to take place in Haiti.
Do you like being asked questions like that?
I don't mind. I mean, it's not like it's this big secret. But I can't tell you much about it simply because I don't know much about it. But I really want to spend. I mean, I've been going to Haiti since 1991, and but less and less these past few years, and I want to go there and just spend an extended period of time and hang out with my friends and just kind of get back into that world. And I have a couple of ideas, for plots that might drive a story that takes place in Haiti.
I have to say, speaking about education, my history education went from dinosaurs to the English Civil War, and I was only in my 20s when I realised that there wasn't an immediate evolution from kind of Brontosaurus to Oliver Cromwell. I had no idea any of the other shit that went on in the middle, so that was
never
quite
knew
a revelation.
you were a creationist. That's very, very interesting. We learn more and more about
So,
Mr.
it took me a while to work
Bertram.
out there was some other stuff in the middle, but then I found out about Egyptians.
It's time to play Toad Suck Arkansas. Reverse Shuffle 6-card Strip Poker Red.
Just to finish with, Ben, we've got a very quick pop culture quiz for you that we do like to inflict upon our guests from time to time. Are you ready for this?
Sure.
Okay, here we go. First question.
Do I win anything?
You win our approbation, which is priceless.
Well, I appreciate that. I would really love one of those T-shirts you're wearing. Though.
Oh, that's very interesting. There are only two in existence at the moment, but it's possible. It's possible. First question. Is it true that your next book is about a kosher butcher from Warsaw who constructs his ideal wife out of leftover cuts of offal and will be entitled Everything is Mutilated?
Is it true that my next novel? It is not true.
That's not true.
Correct, it's not true.
That's the right answer. Well done. You got 1 out of 3. Congratulations. Next question. You might find this a little more difficult. Which Kardashian, all right, focus, think hard. Which Kardashian, and you've got a choice of 3, of course, remember, Kourtney, Kimberly or Khloe, all with a K, quite important, started the recent craze for vajazzling.
For what?
Vajazzling.
Verjazzling?
Vajazzling, yes.
I don't even know what it is.
Oh dear.
And I'm reasonably up on the Kardashians.
Could prove
It's something you do
failure.
in Virginia, obviously.
That's close. It could prove
Yeah,
embarrassing.
I'll take a flyer and say Chloe. Damn, I got it wrong.
I'm sorry.
If Kim was doing it, I would know.
No, it was a trick question, actually. It was actually Jennifer Love Hewitt. Sorry
that
about
was
that.
was
Not
pretty
doing so
low.
well. Not doing so well. Final question. I'm going to name 3 celebrities. 3 celebrities. And I'd like you to correctly identify whether they are A, a solipsist, B, a narcissist, or C, an onanist. So solipsist, narcissist, or onanist. First one, Mitt Romney.
Onanist.
Very right. Absolutely, yes. First part, correct. Nick Clegg. This may be difficult for you. You may not know who he is.
I think he's a celebrity husband.
What would you say to that, Dave?
Close enough. That's close enough.
Hey, let's see.
He's actually our deputy prime minister here. But you were very, very close.
Well, that's kind of, deputy, okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So take a guess.
Let's say onanist.
Absolutely right. Very good. Yes. 2 out of 3 here. Last one. It all hangs on this, really. Vlad the Impaler.
An onanist, clearly.
I'd have said solipsist myself. I'll ask the judge. Dave, your view, please?
What was the other one?
Narcissist or onanist?
I'd have said he was suffering from an antisocial personality disorder personally, but I'd probably go with solipsist.
Yes, that's 2 out of 3. Never mind. We've got a T-shirt knocking around somewhere. We'll give you one. You're at the beginning of your UK tour, aren't you? Mm-hmm. Is this the first time in the UK for you?
Actually, it is.
How do you find it so far? Don't be polite. Don't be polite. You've already trashed our deputy prime minister. So as far as we're concerned, you've got no reputation.
Well, I've been in London for 2 days, and it's very civilized.
You clearly haven't been going to the right path.
Right. Well, we walked around.
Wrong
We
path. Yeah.
we spent a lot of time walking around Chelsea yesterday, and it just seemed so genteel and proper. And
If you go to these Tony neighbourhoods, what do you
Go
expect?
to
is it a Tony?
Don't go to Hackney.
And then-
God's sake.
and then make a comparison.
No, I do want to get out and explore more. I mean, I'm a guy who has spent a lot of time in Haiti, and so I'm not terribly
He
content.
would be used to Hackney, actually, in that case, yes.
Yeah, I'm not terribly content hanging around, for too long in the safe, comfortable places. Although I like safe, comfortable places as much as anybody, but I always get the feeling I'm missing something when I restrict myself like that, and I get
A
restless.
mugging, possibly.
Possibly, that's right. In Hackney, at least, yes. God, do you ever feel worried in Haiti and places like that?
I feel terrified.
Well, actually, 98% of the time, I'm really happy, which is strange because it is a hard place. But I usually feel like I'm where I need to be. I mean, I'm usually learning things and having my system shocked pretty often. There have been moments of, real terror, but that could have happened anywhere. But generally, I have to say, I'm happy when I'm in Haiti.
Well, we very much look forward to having you back after your next book is published.
I really appreciate your having me. This has been fun.
There's only one more thing we do have to do, and that is going to be quite difficult because I normally do ask our guests to tell us about their website or their Facebook page or their Twitter, and you've got nothing like that. So where do we point our listeners to get hold of the book?
To get hold of the book?
Yeah.
I would encourage you to go to your local independent bookstore.
That's a good answer.
I love those people. I probably wouldn't have a career, if that's what you want to call it, if it wasn't for independent booksellers. That's how my editor sold my first book to the internal business people at HarperCollins. She said we can devise a selling strategy around the independents.
Wow, really? Is that how it all started?
Yeah. And the independent booksellers, they are, in my experience, they are the pure. They are devoted and dedicated to books. They sure aren't getting rich selling books.
They're an endangered species at the moment, I'm afraid.
So I would say please go to your independent bookseller and buy Billy Lynn and a couple more books too.
Thank you, Ben. It's been a delight having you with us tonight. As Ben Fountain, his book Billy Lynn's Long Half-Time Walk is right out now in the UK. Buy it from a local independent bookstore if you can, if you want to make Ben happy, and if you don't, get hold of it in any case. And here's a little hint, it is available on a place that ends with Zon, Z-O-N. We'll be back this time next week. From all of us here to all of you, good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
I've got so much left to say, but I'll take my words and walk away. I've got so much left to say, but I'll take my words and walk away. Bring it all back like you want me to pay, and your eyes, they say I should take the blame. There's only so many sorries that a person can say before you took my words and walked away.
Your attention, please. This is an insecurity announcement. Here at Litopia Daily and Litopia After Dark, we're feeling, well, a little bit insecure. But you can help. For the cost of a cappuccino a week, you can help us stay on the air. Just click on the Support Us link on the website and donate what you can. Thank you. We're already feeling more secure.